is not. It will say this project is on page 16.
Okay. Eric, is that, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. A little bit late, for which I apologize, but we had to get, as they say, our ducks in a row and our computers warmed up. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting, or actually a rescheduled meeting of the Planning Commission, but it was formally advertised and noticed. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Walden.
Present.
Ms. Butler.
Present.
Mr. Cummings.
Present.
Mr. Riley. Present. Mr. Chairman, we are not expecting Mr. Stephanidis or Mr. Klein. We have 4 present.
So we have a quorum, we can proceed. The next step is to take a look at the agenda and make any corrections that we need to. I will move to remove the consideration of the legislation concerning extensions to exceptions which have been granted by the Board of Appeals. I've been told that that piece of legislation has been withdrawn and is being returned to the council for further drafting, perhaps to take care of some of the things that we discussed in our last hearing. So with that motion, do I have a second to remove that from the agenda?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right. The second item with respect to the agenda is the findings on the amendments to the Forest Conservation Act. We're not prepared to review those findings, but I would ask you to keep an eye on your emails because I think they'll come out probably around midweek next week, and review them and make any notes that you want to make, and then be prepared to look at them at the next meeting because we do need to move that along to the council. This is a little unusual. I think as I look back, it has to do with kind of confusions around January and February of just getting things rolling. And it's kind of working its way out now. So I move that item, the findings, approval or disapproval or editing of the findings with respect to the Board of Appeals exceptions, extensions, be continued to our next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? No. Okay. With that, I do think that we're prepared to begin. I want to start off, before we get to the reviewing the capital budget, I just as a little anecdote that I want to convey here. I ran into former Commissioner Ben Sale. And Ben was a commissioner when we reviewed and approved the hotel on Taylor Avenue, and went through a great deal of discussion on the crossing for the path, the bike path and the pedestrian paths and all of this, that, and the other thing. And there's a lot of discussion and a lot of detail. Well, the long and short, there has been a temporary island put in place. It's temporary because there was problems getting the Graduate Hotel to agree to a very small sliver of land that was necessary to relocate the pedestrian path, the sidewalk. But it's my understanding that that's just temporary and that the money is in the budget somewhere. Mr. Vogel will probably help us out with this later, to put in actually a permanent island. But Ben Sale drove by it tonight and he said, it is fantastic. He said people are slowing down. They're not to a crawl, but just slowing down, keeping an eye out. And when that permanent island and the pedestrian activated flashers are put in, I think it's going to be a really, great crossing. So the actions that you take will bear fruit. It may take some while, but they will bear fruit, and you'll have the satisfaction of looking at both of your accomplishments and your mistakes in the future years.
No mistakes.
So with that, I think we should move to our main topic of discussion tonight, which is the capital improvement budget. And I would remind you that our observations are to be transmitted to the council. I would like to appoint one of the three volunteers, one of you to volunteer tonight, to sort of keep track and be prepared to write up our findings. Maybe Mr. Riley, it's your turn? Very good. All right. So that the next meeting, we can take a look at that, because we're under some time pressure to get this back to the council, okay? Okey-dokey. So with that, I can't remember the name. At any rate, it's our approval or review of the 2025 capital budget and capital improvement programs. And with us tonight, we have Mr. Eric Lashinsky, who is Chief of Future Planning.
Comprehensive planning.
Comprehensive Future Planning.
Sometimes it's called long-term planning.
And Mr. Burvogel, the Director of the Department of Public Works. Gentlemen, floor is yours.
I'll provide a little introduction to this agenda item. So there was an ordinance, it's an annual ordinance that's introduced to City Council around this time of year. This year it's 07/24, and it's the annual budget. It includes both a capital budget and an operating budget. The Planning Commission, per our city code, is required to review the capital budget component in the capital improvement program. So there's an annual capital budget, and then the capital improvement program looks forward 5 years and tries to project out priorities for those coming years. The code also sets a time frame for the Planning Commission to submit its findings to City Council, and it's no later than the second Monday in May. So that's part of the, I think, value in drafting findings sooner than later to perform your statutory, role as a body here. Now, I think it's worth mentioning also that as a body, the Planning Commission is really tasked to make sure that projects in the city are consistent with a comprehensive plan. We don't have our updated comprehensive plan adopted yet by City Council. We hope that'll happen this summer, but so we're looking back at the 2009 comprehensive plan. I think, as you've read in the staff report, the vast majority of the items in the capital budget are very consistent with that comprehensive plan. And we provided a rundown of the big items, the major changes from last year. But the capital budget it's a reflection of our values, our goals as a city. It's one of those bigger tools to sort of advance our priorities and values. So there's a lot of importance to making sure it's right. And, I want to just commend the Public Works Department and other people who've been involved in the capital budget process for really evolving it. I think last year was the first year that we saw a really significant uptick in the amount of money going towards public water access and some major park initiatives and trail connectivity, safety, traffic safety improvements. So a lot of those things carried over this year. Director Vogel will be going through the major items. But what we're, for those following at home, if anybody is interested in finding the capital budget on the city's website, Director Vogel is
Sure,
pulling it up here.
I'll try to walk you through this here.
I found actually on the city's main landing page, if you go down, if you scroll down, there's actually a button for city budget, right? Keep going, go back up. There's these, keep going up a little bit. See, there's 6 boxes there. One of those is city budget.
Right.
And if you go to that, it takes you to the dedicated page where we track, and it has.
And then the capital improvements program here is this first on the left. And the last year's adopted document is on the right.
So I don't have any further comments, but I guess I'll hand it over unless there are initial questions, but I'll hand it over to the director.
Eric, I have an initial question. You said the majority of the projects listed in the capital improvement plan are consistent with the 2009 comprehensive plan. Will you point out the ones that aren't consistent?
Well, I should have worded it differently. They're all consistent. It's just that some of them are not, some of them get into specifics that frankly are just not, when you're talking about office upgrades or certain facility improvements that,
Fixing a roof is not going to be in the comprehensive.
Right. They get into nuances that are just too specific for the comprehensive plan, but are based on planning that other departments have done to manage life cycle maintenance of facilities.
Yeah,
So,
good answer, thank you. I didn't think you were going to point out a
No.
project that you're putting in here.
yeah.
Okay, with all of that, what my presentation does is provides just kind of a high level, primarily a high level summary of some of the financial aspects, projects that have major changes in them, and then at the back of the presentation is just a snapshot on all of the new projects that are in the budget. The vast majority of the projects that are in the capital improvements budget and program are pre-existing projects of one flavor or another. I'll also go into a little bit of a deeper discussion on CityDock, just the financial picture there, so you all are aware, since that is by far the city's largest project ever. Okay, so total overview of all of the projects, $409 million. Most of that is in the general fund, but also a significant amount in water, sewer, and watershed restoration. One note about that number is that not all of the projects are one-time projects in kind of the traditional sense of something. You think you build it, it goes, you budget for it, you build it, and then you close it out, and then it disappears out of the budget. A number of these, about 5 or 6 of them are recurring projects. Think of things like replacing the sewer lines, replacing the water lines. So water lines run about $5 million a year. And this budget carries them over since more or less the inception of our current budget structure. So you'll see $60 million of water line rehabilitation. It doesn't mean we have $60 million of water lines to replace in the future. That number would probably be closer to 10 or $15 million going forward. But a large number of our waterline projects are completed, and they still show in the budget. So the $410 million is a little bit could be perhaps deceptive in terms of the total amount of work we have to complete.
What is the source of funds for the watershed restoration?
That is on our water and sewer and trash bill. So our monthly or quarterly utility bill that we all pay is part of that.
Could you explain to the public why water bills, actually, they rose before your watch, before you came on, but over the past few years, why did water bills rise so much? Can you explain?
I wouldn't really want to try to just address such a complicated topic that has been, I guess I would refer the public to the Finance Committee meetings that have happened over the past few weeks. One of them was specifically addressed enterprise funds, water, sewer, and watershed restoration. So I think we should probably try to refer people to those discussions. But I can talk about the primary drivers of what is in that and what would cause rates to rise. One reason that rates can rise, maybe dramatically, is because if we have a cash balance, let's say we've got a $10 million cash balance, and we don't need to carry a $10 million cash balance. We think that $2 million is appropriate. What we can do is hold rates steady, allow operating costs to rise and operating capital improvements costs to rise, keep rates steady for a while, and until we do until we kind of hit an equilibrium, and then we start raising rates. So that's one reason. Another reason, maybe we under budget for a while, get a little bit behind, and then have to raise rates to catch up. But I think largely rates are probably increasing not that much higher than the rate of inflation. I think and I'm completely speculating here, if we were to look at the last 10 years, I would expect that our water rates would probably match inflation pretty good. Although costs of construction have, industry-wide, costs of construction have increased faster than the general rate of inflation, particularly since 2020 due to the pandemic and supply chain, things of that nature.
Is it fair to say that people were not paying rates sufficient to support the water system?
That is correct, right? That is a fair characterization, especially because we try to be forward-looking, right? So if we know that we need to increase an investment level to do replacement projects, our rate analysis takes those things into account and tries to get ahead of that, so we don't have to have dramatic spikes. I think one of the goals of these rates is to keep them stable, so we don't have wild fluctuations, crazy hikes in one year, drops the next. Rate stability is an important goal.
Okay. It's a partial explanation. My understanding is that we were getting cheap water, too cheap, and we were not paying the costs of keeping the water system going, and that's why it had to rise.
I think at one point in time, and this is just things that I've heard, is that the water rates did not fully support, in this enterprise fund, the water fund, did not fully support the debt service, for capital improvements and the operating costs. And so the general fund would have to subsidize. I don't know when that practice stopped, but certainly we're in a much healthier position today, where all of the enterprise funds have sufficient cash reserves and do not rely on the general fund to more or less subsidize them. That is more of an operating budget question than a capital improvements question. So. All right, so these are the new projects, and each one of them is listed in my presentation towards the end, and we'll jump through those at the end. And here we have projects with significant cost or scope changes. And the page references there are, again, to that capital improvements budget document. All of these, except for one, are an increase. But I think City Harbor Flood, page 32, is likely a decrease. That's the Compromise Street Flood Mitigation Project. And these two projects were removed from the capital improvements program because they are complete. This table shows the changes in the City Dock Resilience and Revitalization Project from the 2024 budget to the 2025 budget. And one note here, you can see there that the construction budget target is $70 million. We have some work to do to bring the project within that budget target. But we do not have sufficient funds even currently, even to fully fund that $70 million number. So one of the aspects of the mechanics of building the budget is that we make sure that the identified funding sources match the costs in the project when you look at any project page. So that means sometimes we artificially will reduce the budget, and that's the case here. So we see in the 2025 budget, $63,400,000, and that's because that's all of the currently available funding.
With respect to the city dock funding, does that include protection of the hotel and the fleet reserve?
That is not this project. So the city dock resilience and revitalization, in essence, covers from Naval Academy Gate Zero at Prince George Street through what is through Dock Street, that new park, the Kunta Kinte Memorial area at Randall Street, and ends at 110 Compromise, or before 110 Compromise, in what is now the Donner parking lot, and we propose to make that the Donner Park.
Phase one. Phase one that's been approved.
Perhaps project one. I tried to avoid the words phases.
Yeah, I didn't.
So, because this project in and of itself has 3 phases.
Thank you.
I was just asking if the funding that you're noting here is related to the project that's already been approved.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So there was a what you might have called a phase 1 site plan for this project, and that came to the Planning Commission in January.
So
And that is part of this.
because I'm trying to answer your question at the same time, does not include from beyond Donner Park to the yacht club on one side and the tie-in to the Naval Academy.
Correct. That other project is this next one. So this is, if you're following by numbers, this is CIP number 40042. The next project, City Harbor flood mitigation, which is the older of the 2 projects, is CIP number 50005. This project includes the elevated bulkhead, or more or less you could think of it as the extension of the existing concrete capped bulkhead from 110 Compromise down in front of the Fleet Reserve. It also includes pump station next to the Fleet Reserve in the alley at Donner Street, at Donner. Sorry, Newman Street, misspoke. So getting back to City Dock, some Costco's drivers here, subsurface conditions are very unfavorable. We've had to shuffle around our intended location for electrical infrastructure, Fountain and Welcome Center, to build those to the standards that we think are appropriate, is becoming a bit more expensive than we had thought 18 months ago. And then, of course, inflation. I do want to emphasize there that second bullet. Since we may be having to make some tough choices on the budget, our approach to budgeting for City Dock is to make sure what we build to a high standard and a high level. And if we need to defer some large elements, things that come to mind are that proposed park at the Donner parking lot is something we could do 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. It's not really essential to the core of the project, which is the resiliency aspect, and then that main park area that is where the existing harbor master. Those are some of the things that we consider to be absolutely core, and the approach we are taking in the design and the budget is to build those things to an appropriate standard, so we don't have to more or less go cheap on finishes, things like that. Mr. Walton.
On that note of sort of planning for future projects, because what you do now is going to affect finishing things off in the future. I don't know that it got much notice, but the commission, when it approved what we did approve, whatever you call it.
You approved a site plan.
But one of the conditions that we added was that, in the triangular parking lot in front of what used to be Mission Barbecue, in front of Storm Brothers, on that side, that currently remains as a parking lot, is to ensure that when you design your infrastructure, your underground utilities, that you design them so that in the future, when everybody comes around, that becomes a park and you can plant trees in the middle. I just wanted to take this opportunity to let.
All right.
Okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Real quick question. Can you speak to the grant funding necessary to finish up City Dock redevelopment and where we are on that?
We have one significant grant that we are applying for. So we've received a number between that we can kind of shift between the two projects that are down there. Many of the grants are just to prevent City Dock funding, and they don't really care how we structure our budgets. But we do have a $32 million FEMA flood mitigation grant application in that we applied for in February of 2023. We are still on a timeline to have that grant approved right around November, which would allow us to start construction in November and do really the heaviest and most complicated parts of the project in this upcoming year between the fall of 2024 boat show and the fall of 2025 boat show. So grant funding, $32 million coming our way as soon as we can complete the National Environmental Policy Act requirements for an environmental assessment, which is in progress.
And full disclosure, I work for FEMA, but not within the grants area. I don't have purview over that. I have no influence over that. But did want to say that I did run into some FEMA Region 3 folks at the National Planning Conference just last month that I was in Minneapolis for, and wanted to point out that they said you all are doing a fabulous job and moving along really nicely.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Yeah, we have an incredible collaboration. Like every month at a minimum, we're on the phone with a very large team, and things are really humming along.
Can you help me understand the deadline piece, though? Like, what's the deliverable, and what happens if we don't happen to hit it or something?
So this is a really, really heavy lift, I'll be honest. Getting an environmental assessment done for anybody who's familiar with that world, cranking through one of those in 6 months is going to be really, really challenging. And then at the end of the 6 months, they have to do a record of environmental consideration. Then from there, they can do a congressional notification. That is a process. It can take 30 days up to 60. And so there are a lot of places where this can kind of go sideways. A consultation with another agency that takes a little bit too long, some additional archaeological resources that we need to investigate. So this is by no means assured that we will get the environmental assessment completed with a finding of no significant impact in we're really hoping for September or October, is kind of what we're shooting for there. So we have Plan B, we have Plan C. Plan B would be, what could we do in less than an 11-month period? If we know to knock down the Harbor Master building, which takes all of the electrical infrastructure offline, and then you have to show that if we can't do that, we'll start in a different area, something probably that is in another site plan, that some of the stuff that was outside the boundaries of that initial site plan, we would start there and then defer that core park work until the next year. So start in the fall of 25, finish up before the 26 boat show with the demolition of the Harbor Master building and rebuilding all of the electrical infrastructure. So that's Plan B. Do less work, maybe in a 6 or 7 month period. Plan C is just defer the whole project a year. Keep the same sequencing, but start a year later.
And reapply.
No, it's
still
the grant is the grant is going to come. It's just a matter of, is it September, December, March of 25, May of 25?
So I'm like a fifth grader here.
Sure.
Help me understand what keeps you up at night to hit Plan A. Like, what are the biggest impediments? And is there anything that
I guess I gave you the rundown.
Well, just like the big, the big stuff.
What's that?
The big stuff. That's like,
It is all this environmental assessment. The environmental assessment, and if anybody's done federal projects, you understand that NEPA can be just, there's a lot of requirements to do that, and typically you plan for 12 months. Trying to do it in 6 is quite aggressive.
but there's no bureaucratic log jams that are going to prevent you from going through that process, which we can't do anything about, or other people in the political community can do anything about.
Lots of bureaucratic log jams. Yeah, that we have to get through all of them. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand mine.
I have a quick question. This might.
We have been making use of our federal lobbyists. We have one. We're using them.
You can
Real quick. So yeah, we talked about this a couple months ago, and in my conversations with the people from FEMA Region 3, again, I want to make sure that I caveat this, that I do not work grants at FEMA, so I'm not trying to impede, but I let them know my role on the Planning Commission. So if I may ask those questions in the regard of that role, and don't tell me anything that is not available. So they said that the office is doing a great job working, right? Their major concern was what you just spelled out yourself, was the timing, right? The timing seems to be going to be the most risk in terms of trying to get the phases in the time that we would hope to see the money. The other concern is that the funding for FMA, which is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, that's a grant that you're using, yes? Are you going through?
It's HMGP 4491.
HMGP. Okay,
Yeah.
That's what you're using. Okay, so that's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and so if it's HMGP, that's less worrisome. Then that's good to know. If it was FMA or BRIC, that funding is appropriated each year from whoever's the presidential administration, and so November could influence that. But since it's through HMGP, that wouldn't be a problem then.
That's good.
We're feeling highly confident that the money will come. Yeah. Again, it's just complete the NEPA, and then we get the green light to start work. City Harbor flood. So here's a project. In last year's budget was $28 million. In 2025, we're projecting only 17.5 million. I really want to point out that one little note. This should raise some, maybe get some thoughts going. How does somebody cut $20 million out of a fully designed project? And the answer is it's not necessarily easy, and there is not a resilience commission for this city. So perhaps the Planning Commission sees, kind of thinking about resilience as part of your role, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about that particular design change, some of the risks that we decided to accept in order to take what was about $40 million worth of work and cut it into maybe 15, right? So we made some design decisions there that we think are very prudent, but it shouldn't just be the Public Works Director making that call on my own with nobody asking me any questions about what the effects of that are. Too much to get into tonight, but I would like to offer or perhaps ask you to invite me back at some future meeting. Burr, please explain to me what you are doing with pump stations, because the basic concept here is we always talk about the flood barriers, keeping the tidal waters out. But when the tides are high and they're being held back by our wonderful new flood barriers, and then it rains, the water has no place to go. The rainwater has no place to go. You must have pumps to push that water out through your flood barriers. You can think of it as pushing the water over. It's the same idea. And so there's a lot of money. There was, at one point, about $50 million between the two projects, targeting specifically dealing with stormwater. Heavy rain happens, you have to have massive pumps, you have to have massive tanks to store that water and things of that nature. We've downsized a lot of that. And again, I think we did it smartly, but somebody should be asking me much harder questions than anybody has to date.
But are those design changes, they haven't happened since we approved the first project of City Dock? Because we approved a site design plan based on
You
everything.
approved a site plan, but nobody's asking me how many cubic feet per second of water being pumped out. How big is your wet well? What happens during the 10-year storm? What happens during the 30-year storm? Those are the kinds of questions that people should be asking me, and they haven't yet.
So in other words, there have not been design changes since the Planning Commission approved the City Dock.
That's correct. But again, we didn't give you those details, right? That's a site plan.
Right.
We didn't show you any information about
Right,
pumps
and I'm not an
because
engineer.
that's all underground stuff. That's all mechanical things. It's not even required to be shown in a site plan.
Yeah, and Director Vogel, I'm not an engineer, and I'm probably not qualified to ask those questions, so we are relying on you to get that right. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to come up with those kind of questions in the future. So I'm just hoping that, you know, your analysis is what,
I think what I'm asking here is ask me about the risk.
ask you about what?
Ask me about the risk.
Oh, the risk of.
Yeah, the risk of what can happen
Right.
during a heavy rain event. And I can come back and explain that. I've got pictures that will explain all of it, and I can talk about probabilities and things of that nature. It is just, somebody should be asking me that question. Because all of you and other people, City Council, the Environmental Commission, lots of folks have asked me questions about the flood barriers themselves. It's something that I think is very tangible. We can see it. We understand that the tides come in and we have high seawalls. It'll keep those tidal waters at bay. But this other aspect of it, the rain, is not something we think about very much, because when we have a high tide and it's raining, we're already flooded. In the future, we'll be dry during high tide. It'll be raining. And if we don't do the stormwater design right, we'll flood anyway. And there'll be a lot of unhappy people.
I appreciate that.
I think tonight is not the night.
Tonight is not the night. That is my point.
It's relevant tonight.
I think we need it on the agenda sometime, though.
Yeah.
That's my request.
We'll talk agenda later this
Yeah.
evening about what's coming up. It may be that sometime midsummer, we could do a work session, or as part of our, depending on what we've got, that we've got to move, in which case we could invite City Council, Environmental Commission, and just do it as a work session. I
That'd be
mean,
fantastic.
It could be publicized, televised, but, okay. That's-
Okay, moving on.
And to defend the "we're not engineers" comment, I think a lot of us, I can only speak for myself, but people, our constituents, think that it's one and the same. The crisis that's created by the flood that puts Storm Brothers into crisis for the 5th time in 12 years or whatever it is, 15 years. The rain on top of that hasn't even been I haven't even.
Because that's
considered
zero,
what that would be.
right now, it has zero effect on anyone. But if you build tidal barriers and you build no pumps, if you have a high tide and it rains, we will flood,
Gotcha.
Okay.
I hear you.
because the water has no place to go.
That's interesting. All right.
Okay. That's really it for all of the planned remarks. At this point in time, I can just pause for questions. You can flip through the budget if you have that, if there are things you want to address, or I can just do what I did with the City Council, which is flip through these, let you read what's on there, and then I'll just move through if there are no questions. That worked well with City Council. Good.
So this hasn't, I missed one planning commission meeting this year, and I thought that this is what happened. You went through each item that were significant new budget enhancements and so that's not what happened? Did I miss any? Oh, okay, this is it.
This is it.
Right, so what's coming up in these next 10 or 15 slides is each of the new projects. And you'll see some of them are fairly, perhaps mundane, like this one, or incredibly significant, like this one.
So is there, is there a way to add a bike lane to Bay Ridge Avenue?
This project will take some time. We really wanted to, get this project off the ground. It's a corridor that people already use extensively for cycling. It's important north-south corridor, but it's pretty unsafe. The bike facilities that exist on the roadway today are inconsistent, and they kind of change without much notice. We did a feasibility study over a year ago and found that we could do a dedicated shared use path on one side, essentially the right side of the image here. We have the feasibility study on our comprehensive planning website, but we will probably need to acquire some additional right-of-way to make this work. There's a lot of utilities in the way, but the basic idea is we can create a dedicated 10-foot path on one side, so at least one side of Bay Ridge Avenue will have a really safe and comfortable two-way corridor, and then the other side might still have a sidewalk that's not really adequate, but we can at least improve one side here. And along the shopping center, which is just out of the screen, we would work with the shopping center to use some of their underutilized space, against the parking lot. We would do the same at the Hillsmere Shopping Center. So those are some of the things that came out of the feasibility study. We could really do something significant along this corridor, but it will take time. And we have a grant to advance this to 30% design. I expect to kick that project off this summer.
What does that mean, 30% design?
It basically gets us to a dimension. We have dimension drawings. We've done the survey work. We get to a design that the community is essentially in favor of. We kind of do a lot of community engagement with property owners along the way and other stakeholders. And we get to a design that is doable, that is supported, and then a lot of the bigger issues are kind of, put to rest, and we can
But it's not like shovel in the ground.
No, so we would then go to like 65% design and then 100% design.
Okay.
So these things definitely happen in phases. And one of the things that Burr might mention is we have a new item in our capital budget called Connecting Communities, which is going to create a dedicated fund for these projects, so we don't have to have them be grant funded every time, and that really puts a lot of adds additional time and effort to doing them. It kind of delays them, frankly. But the right-of-way acquisition piece is important to acknowledge. I mean, that also is a challenge for just about every project. We're trying to do more with our roadways.
So that's kind of my question is more like we can use this as an example of me just trying to get a better understanding of how we kind of go through the process. And you want to get your foot in the door, and you need to you have to have like a proof of concept, and that costs money, right? A feasibility study or what have you. Right. I think you had like $294,000 for this particular project that was in for this year. So to get to 30%, that's like whatever, engineers, city planners, like you guys, like all the things that go into producing the proof of concept to get to that 30%.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
Or is that
Correct. Absolutely. Yep. And then you get to that first level of construction drawings, and now you have something that you can go and acquire permanent easements or expand the road right of way. So you have to get through the pretty mature level of design, invest another level of money. Now you're in the land acquisition mode, which we can be in for quite some time. while you're finishing up your final design, and then you can go to construction. Those are the major steps.
Yeah, and you also get I think you get a better sense of what the construction is going to cost after 30% design. So then you can look for that money and make sure
Then
that's
the
in
next
place.
phase becomes a lot more clear coming out.
Yeah.
You can get to 65%, then you get to 100, then you can put a shovel in the ground.
So what is in the budget? Is the design funding, or there's no,
Design only.
just the design?
Design only. Sure.
And I just have a comment about, you talked about the Eastport Shopping Center. This is the time, if you were going to do any consultation with Dan Letterberg, it's now. Don't let this thing go out of your, it's obviously the time.
Definitely
to
agree.
now.
Yeah.
Quick question here. The vulnerable road users are a special concern of mine. Less than 400 feet from where I live is a ghost bike. Ghost bike is where, for people who are unfamiliar with ghost bikes, it's a scene where they put a white painted bike to demonstrate where someone has passed, has died because of a car collision with a bicycle. And I also want to note that it's only a couple hundred meters past where a bike lane ends. Right. And so, one, I love seeing that we're expanding it. But two, I use the bike lanes to go around all the time, and people are flying by me. And when it's just a white stripe, are there any plans to do more than just a white painted stripe?
Yeah, that particular location that I believe you're referring to, Hilltop Lane, that's another, I think it might be in the presentation. Or
Right. And so that's another. So when we talk about a shared use path, you are above, you're not at the road level. So you're at the sidewalk level with a 10-foot wide shared between cyclists and pedestrians. And so that physical barrier of the curb is fantastic, right? And then you're also, you not just have the barrier of the curb, but you're also not riding right along that curb. So that is sort of our gold standard, right? That is our highest level, what we try to achieve. And then, backing off from that, sometimes you'll see flex posts. Sometimes you'll see curbs separating the vehicle travel lanes from the bike lanes, which are fine, but then it creates a little bit of an issue maybe with snowplows hitting them, things like that. But this is really what we're going for where we can is a 10-foot shared use path. Yeah. And if we get Bay Ridge, we get Hilltop Tyler done, then make some connections back into through Murray Hill, through the Spot Creek Trail. We start to really create some nice corridors. Of course, the West-East extension, Poplar Trail, that kind of thing. All of these. That's a fantastic thing because you're not even next to a road.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the segment that you just mentioned earlier, that project is much farther along than this. We actually submitted drawings for that Hilltop Lane connection to permitting for a grading permit, and that's fully funded. And so, actually, what you're going to see in this capital budget is the same treatment that we're doing from Boxwood Road to Forest Drive, where that bike lane ends currently on Hilltop Lane. We're looking to do that same off-street shared use path for the entirety of Hilltop Lane all the way to Bay Ridge Avenue. It's one of the only streets in the city where we don't have the constraints. We have adequate right-of-way. It's up for paving, repaving. So, Public Works basically said, well, if we're going to repave Hilltop Lane, we might as well do that ideal trail
In
design.
addition
to, and then we're going to do three birds with one stone because we have some traffic safety improvements we would really like to do in that same corridor.
Perfect. Yeah.
Because it's not always safe to cross, even at Gemini, where we have the flashing beacon. Vehicle speeds are really too high. So we're going to do some things for some traffic calming measures, first temporarily, then permanent. And we'll design all of that, and we'll build it all at once. So shared use path, traffic safety improvements, brand new resurfacing, and we'll have a very good corridor.
Right. And if I can put a plug, also right there where the rec center is, I see kids having to play Frogger to get.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What was that near Hill? I know where the
Pitt Moyer Rec Center.
Right.
Yeah, kids having to play Frogger, where they have to to try to figure out a way to safely cross that street and running.
Oh, yeah.
I literally have videos where I've seen
didn't know there was a
kids
word.
having to play Frogger to cross the road.
Right. So what we want to do is bring vehicle speeds down at that particular location. I think it's at Milkshake Lane. There's a bus stop there, and so if you don't want to walk to one of the up to Primrose and come back, or down to Gemini and use one of the signalized crossing places, it's not a great place to put a crosswalk. There's some safety concerns about actually putting a painted crosswalk right there, but we at least bring speeds down, which will help tremendously. And then we're looking with Gemini. One of these projects that's coming up is for a traffic signal at Gemini, a full-on red light.
I promise we'll try not to take this much time on every step.
No, look, we're covering 90% of this. I know what really, probably interests people is all of these road improvements, cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. Getting back to Eric's opening remarks about where we put our money here in this capital project is a reflection of our priorities as a city and as the elected officials. And so it's clear that this is on everybody's minds. And I think it's going to make, an already great city world class.
And I'm always reminding folks that, there's plenty of people out there who will never get on a bicycle. They have no interest. They don't have any interest in walking anywhere. But if they're concerned about traffic congestion, we're on Peninsula. We don't have space to expand roadways or add new roadways. The only thing we really can do is provide more options to get around without a car for those who are interested in doing that, particularly shorter trips, kids going to school, so people don't have to drop their kids off. There's lots we can do just to improve those other options.
Which is working all over the world.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
Cities all over the world.
Cities all over the world. You can't build new roadways, so how do you get people out of cars? You make a safe way for people to use. We call them bike paths, but it's going to be used by a ton of scooters, other low-powered electric devices. It's not going to be everybody on bikes.
And it's working. I even take scooters when I have to come downtown and don't want to deal with parking. And people are back and forth to Eastboro on scooters and bikes more than ever.
Spot Creek Bridge will be a challenge. I think about that all the time. What are we going to do there? But we'll figure it out eventually. Okay, Chesapeake Children's Museum, just some small improvements for that facility or the area around it. This is a grant funded just for boaters, replacing those pedestals. Number of city facility roofs. We have some green roofs that have not been maintained particularly well, so they're no longer really functioning as green roofs. And in fact, when you get plantings growing on a green roof that you don't want, they cause roof leaks because the roots grow too deep.
And do you know, I was going to say, do you know why they're not being maintained? It's
common. I'm sorry. It just happens. People build stuff, high five at the ribbon cutting, woohoo, and don't think about, I need to put in place a maintenance contract to have a landscaper take care of that so that only the correct succulents and so on grow up there.
Do you know if there'll be a contract for long-term maintenance of these?
Yes, that's the direction we're going.
Pardon me?
That's the direction we're going. So we'll rehabilitate them, get them back to where they should be, and then maintain them properly going forward.
Because the Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional Designation trains people to do maintenance of these BMPs. And so they're a really great source for long-term maintenance of our best management practices, especially these things.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Who knew? Just as a process question, though, all the numbers that you have in here, you guys are, can't believe how many projects that you guys keep up with, but you have done the research to understand enough about the cost of these types of things, because there's some pretty specific numbers. I'm just curious how you come up with some of those. I know there's a little guesswork.
Some of them are just really just crazy guesses, and some maybe there's some quotes and everything in between.
Yeah, I'm just curious how you go through.
And so what we'll tend to do is, because these projects take a couple of years to go through, when we're ready to actually do the construction, oftentimes we'll have much more refined estimates, either engineering estimates or quotes in hand, and then that following year's budget will have a very accurate number. Or if we're a little bit short on a project, for a little bit short on project, then we come back to the finance committee, ask for an amendment to the budget, and just move money around. This project title is office space planning, but there's $3 million or so in there, so it's not just for planning, it is to actually pay for some improvements on leased space or to be part of a down payment, something like that, on office space we might buy.
One of the shall we say, many opportunities that were missed during the Panelides administration was to lease space at what used to be MAFE on Forest Drive and put permitting there, which would remove all of the hassle that people have of coming downtown and doing everything here on Gorman Street. Is there any possibility, as long as this is a big project, is there any possibility of putting your permitting and licensing stuff out there?
Certainly we'll consider moving to different locations. I think there'll be a lot of factor, maybe pros and cons of separating the permitting desk from all of the inspectors and the various people who work in planning and zoning that they interact with. So I think my sense is, I don't work in planning and zoning, but my sense is they probably want to all be co-located. And so maybe that does mean we move towards Park Place, the Westgate Circle area. These things will be considered, for sure.
There's also a lot more of the permit applications are happening online. That's just been an evolution of the process. Certainly plenty of people come down and want to do it in person still, but there's been an effort to make it easier for people to do it remotely, so.
I don't want you to divulge any negotiating secrets, but is Park Place one of the places you're looking at?
We've just completed arranging for the services of a real estate consultant. So somebody who's going to walk us.
Services of what?
A real estate consultant. I'll call them consultant, but a commercial real estate firm. And that kickoff meeting is on Tuesday. So we're just starting. We've done some space planning studies. We understand what our requirements are. Those include a little bit of a market assessment on what we could expect to pay. But for now, we're going to move into the actual work of a search for new spaces.
So you didn't divulge any negotiating secrets?
I didn't divulge any. There's nothing to divulge.
Nothing to hide. All right. But anyway, I mean, MAFE was always struck a lot of people as a convenient place for people who need to stop in and stop out,
Yeah, and to me, I mean, kind of new to town, newish, I guess, at this point. Westgate Circle also seems like a pretty central, lots of main roads in and out of that, in and out of that area. Eastport Choice neighborhoods. Really don't want to get into all the ins and outs of the public housing and mixed use and the long-term plans here, but I do want to say what this is focused on is providing a funding source to help further define and mature the project through design, maybe some site investigations, to make a future streamline or expedite or make a more attractive to a developer. So this is not a capital improvements project to build 600 units of housing. It is to move us in the right direction.
This is really for design phase. What we're trying to attract a top-notch developer partner that has the right experience, that understands the context here, and can really be a terrific partner to do this project right. And we want to incentivize that by providing what we would call pre-development funding. Essentially, this would augment the design phase work. And we've asked for a match from the state for this $1 million. There's a lot at stake in this project. And so this would really help get it off on the right foot. We expect the city's going to make other contributions later through the CIP, but we don't have the details yet on what that will look like, for infrastructure, et cetera.
But this funding, in effect, pays for the developers to design and for us to evaluate all the
Partially.
different ideas that are coming forth?
Yeah, partially. Yeah, it would be towards the design phase.
Because we have, like, the comprehensive plan, for example, is looking for workforce housing. You want a kind of a mixed, if a developer came in and did it themselves, they're going to maximize their profit.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that they come up with the right plan. So you're willing to subsidize the design phase. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
let me actually back up and say for anybody who's watching at home as well that we did a 2-year planning process behind this project. This is the redevelopment, revitalization of the city's largest public housing community in Eastport. It's on Spa Creek. It's a concentration of poverty and at times violence. We really need to improve the housing there. The process that we went through was a program that HUD has, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to basically transition aging public housing communities into more thriving, mixed income, mixed use communities where the neighborhoods are better integrated into the larger city, both physically, in terms of street connections and amenities, but also social programs and, that kind of support network. So we went through that process. It was really competitive to get the initial planning funds from HUD for that. It was about $500,000. We did this really robust community planning process, came out with this plan in November, this past November. HUD approved that plan. We have a resolution for the City Council to adopt that plan, which is really critical to be able to apply for the next round of funding through HUD, which would be in the range of $50 million for this project, which still is only a fraction of what it's going to cost ultimately. But so when you think about it, this is going to be a $300 million project. I know it's City Dock seems like a lot of work. It is. And this is going to be kind of another City Dock project. But
And I think getting back to why provide money up front to a developer, and the way it's been explained to me, and it makes sense, is that the ultimate build out through all of the regulatory hurdles could take quite some time before a developer sees any money coming back. And in fact, the project could get tripped up. And so to entice people to partner with us, we're saying we'll take some of that initial risk. It might cost you $5 million just to come up with plans that you could bring to the Planning Commission, and then who knows how long that things could take from there forward. But at least we're going to cover $2 million of that notional $5 million, and so you're having to put less money just completely at risk that you have no assurance you're ever going to get back. Once I think we move into full-on construction and they have revenue streams coming at them through rent, most likely, then the developer will be footing the large portion of the financial burden, with of course support from HUD for the low-income things.
And the types of developers that would be involved in this project are not the developers that are doing the high-end development. I mean, these are affordable housing developers. They specialize in doing workforce housing and housing for populations that don't have access to the housing options they should have. So that their pro forma, their profit is different, and frankly, the return is, as Burr said, it's a lot less clear. There's a lot more hurdles. The financing is very complicated for these projects because they're just not, the units that are going to be created are not going to rent for the kind of amounts that you see in other projects. So
That's great. I mean,
yeah.
One thing concerns me a little bit is that the project get down the road, the developer negotiates what he thinks is the design that that developer is comfortable with, and a contract is signed, and off they go, and then 6 months, 9 months, a year later, you're before the Planning Commission, and the commission wants to make changes. I may not be around, and this may not be directly relevant to budget discussions, but nonetheless, it would be very important that before that contract is signed, that you have at least a work session with whatever planning commission there is, because the planning commission may say, you know, less parking, more trees, move this, move that, you know, and the developer's got to decide whether they want to accept those changes or not. That's the moment that there needs to be feedback, public feedback into the process. Okay? Gotcha.
Yeah, great.
You'll
Thank
be
you.
around. I
Yeah.
won't be.
You'll be around.
It's going to take,
Maybe not here.
it's going to take 3 years before you get a developer on? 2 years?
Hopefully less, I think.
Yeah.
All right, anyway, that's good. We're looking forward to it because it's going to, you know, it's going to be quite something. All right.
Okay, Eastport flood mitigation, largely looking at grants here, taking care of some, just similar to what we have going on City Dock area over, particularly in the area of the Maritime Museum.
So this is just a grant application, or this has been funded through?
So the CIP project, what, page 40? I think it's all proposed as grant funding at this point, and it may be design only right now. Mix, a little bit of mix of bonds and grants. This is at that the Spot Road site where Public Works is. We've got below ground storage tanks, and we're required to remove those, replace them with above ground tanks.
You're going to put tanks back in there?
We do. I mean, we need to keep the fuel facility in service.
Oh, I thought everything was moving to Legion Avenue.
I don't know anything about Legion Avenue.
I thought we were closing that fueling station, and the city was going to partner with the county and sort of piggyback on that.
Evidently, that was not workable.
Is what?
That was not workable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So elsewhere in the capital improvement budget is money for housing construction on basically those Spa Road sites.
Right, part of that Eastport Choice Neighborhoods project we were just talking about includes 100 new units at this site. So when that project comes to fruition, we will need to find a new location for our fuel facility. These tanks will just be picked up and moved to that new location, but we'll have to acquire land, all of that. Would love to not have to operate a city fuel station, but just not possible with the need to be able to fuel our fire trucks. We really can't use a county facility.
So, in short, above ground tanks can be moved fairly easily to a location once you find one.
Absolutely, yeah. Hilltop Lane, hiker biker, we talked about this a good bit earlier. This is that other piece, the full connection from, so when built, we'll be able to go all the way from Bay Ridge to Forest Drive, because the Boxwood piece is already in design. New playground at Newman Street. Harbor Master project here, replacing mooring balls.
Is this replacing the existing number of mooring balls or adding a new one?
Whatever it says is all I know.
So, yeah, the question was, does it replace existing mooring balls or add any new ones? And the answer is you don't.
It looks to be a replacement.
Replacement of existing.
Just replacement of existing.
Thanks.
Talked about the kind of three birds with one stone. This is that third piece with the traffic signal at Gemini. Evaluating the one right there at the Pit Moyer Recreation Center. Trucks and road parking improvements. This will, what we're proposing here is to make Primrose, where it parallels Truxton Park Road, make that a one-way loop, and we'll be able to add parallel parking on the side of Primrose, and then there will be a cut through as we get down towards the boat ramp. should improve traffic safety as well as add parking, which is desperately needed there. And because Truxton Park is in the critical area, we're kind of tapped out on additional impervious surface. Shoreline stabilization at Truxton Park, we've got some significant erosion there we're going to correct on the legacy trails. A number of new waterway improvement projects. These are grant funded, essentially replacement in kind, except that the old fixed piers will be replaced with floating docks at 4th Street and Shipwright Street. A new floating dock at the end of Pump House Road, and that's the road that goes down past the swimming pool. This would allow people access to Spa Creek at a location other than the boat ramp in Truxton Park.
I have a question.
And that is the end.
One question about Truxton Park. I realize that there are a couple of projects there, including shoreline stabilization and the parking improvements. Do you know what's happening with the electrical problem, which keeps kids from being able to go in the water? Everyone, not just kids.
Evidently, a study has been completed. I have not had the opportunity to read it yet.
But there's no money here to do any work there, so that.
There might be.
Okay.
There is a project for that, I think.
There is a project for Truxton Park. The study that Burr referenced is being managed by Jackie Guile, the Deputy City Manager for Resilience. And as I understand it, a specialized electrician from Baltimore was hired to do the study that kind of focuses exclusively on marine electric current. And that was sort of the next effort to identify the cause. And so, I mean, coming out of that, there might be some additional.
Right, so for the current coming fiscal year, there's no money there to deal with this at all. It's just good to know. I mean, there's no money in the budget right here identified for that project. Okay.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
So if modifications can be made that would be under $50,000, we can use the operating budget. Over $50,000, we would have to introduce a new capital project.
What you just ran us through were just new, all the new projects on.
I ran you through the new projects, and then there are, that was maybe 10 or 15, and then there are 80 other ones that are in progress.
Okay.
80 is an exaggeration, but
Learning on the fly.
40 or 50.
Tucker Street boat ramp, has that issue been resolved?
Tucker Street
Boat ramp,
boat ramp.
has the issue been resolved?
It is not resolved. I think we're making good progress, though. Coming to the Port Wardens Commission in the next 1 or 2 months. And what I think is the key to making a boat ramp work in that area is enforcement.
Is what?
Enforcement. We have to make sure that the size of boats that are there are appropriate, so that they, people have tried to back down large boats. It's terribly unsafe, and that to avoid a crazy amount of congestion, we need to have only permitted people there. So we are working with our parking enforcement company to do license plate readers there, and that would allow them to ticket people who were not authorized to be using the boat ramp, which we think will, regardless of making it from a gravel ramp to a full concrete ramp with the floating dock, something needs to be done right now. On a busy Saturday, especially if Sandy Point fills up, people come over here whether they have a permit or not, and it creates an absolute mess on the residential street. So that's where we're going. But we've got a design that I think everybody is happy with, but but the neighborhood is rightly concerned about just the unauthorized use and some of the bad behavior.
4 homes. Any other comments here? Then let me make some observations of my own. First of all, there's a lot more. I actually read through a lot of these projects. My general conclusion is that this budget reflects more of the thinking that has gone on in the city for the past 15 years. It's been really developing more and more. It's been gathering steam and momentum. And this current administration this is the manifestation of this current administration's, visions. And that's the impression that I got. So much more emphasis placed on public use of public properties, whether it's a street or a sidewalk or a boat ramp or a park. There's tremendous emphasis on the public's access and use of public property and maintaining it and developing it and so forth. So that was my basic takeaway. I mean, that just generally covers everything from pickleball lights to, street end parks. I felt very good about that. We've been talking about things like Hilltop Lane and Bay Ridge Avenue and aside from City Dock for the past 20 years, and now it's happening. So those are my observations. The details I leave in your hands.
It's an exciting time to be here. I really appreciate, I feel like standing on the shoulders of giants. People have been laying a lot of groundwork. Credit to the administration, the city council, folks like yourself for getting us where we are. I really meant it when I said earlier, it's a great city, but we're going to take it to another level. And for the benefit of everybody, not the few, I think it really spreads the benefit across the spectrum of all of our residents, race, socioeconomic status, whatever.
This budget reflects that. Anything else?
I have one question, and maybe it's a budget issue, and it's not that has to do with specific departments. But we've talked a lot about our tree canopy in the past and preserving our tree canopy. And I thought there was going to be some money in the budget for a real master tree plan for the city, as well as some money for maintaining our current tree plan, which includes taking invasive species off of our trees, which there's been no budget for in the past. So it's kind of a new thing. I thought would appear in a bullet point.
So that's, again, kind of an operating budget thing.
Okay.
And there was an extensive conversation on that just this afternoon in Environmental Matters with the Planning and Zoning Director, Brian Adams, the urban forester. I piped in because some public works flavored money are going to help with that. So we are going to ramp up that program. We can't go from 0 to 60, in 1.6 seconds. But the resources will be there to get that program where it needs to be over the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Yeah, and I mentioned to Brian that Chesapeake Bay Trust has several grants. They say things like capacity building grants, and some of them even say stormwater capacity, but it really is about, trying to retain our trees. And I told Brian I'd be happy to sit down and help him write a grant, because there just seems to be a lot of money for some of these projects right now, and the city doesn't have the money. We can get at least our master tree policy or plan in writing. That would be a huge help for us. So I'll meet with Chris and Brian about that.
If I may, I talk too much. Trees. Most of the recreational facilities in this city are actually school fields. They are not city parks. The only large city park is Truxton Park. All of the other recreational fields are city fields, are school property fields, excuse me.
Or county, let's say in the case of Powell.
the
I guess they're
division
outside the city.
between the school system and the county is very clear. I won't go into a horrible personal anecdote, but I can just say that personally, I'm beginning a little crusade to get trees planted on school properties. What is it that they need? You know, what's the design considerations, the maintenance considerations, and so forth and so on. And when some of that gets firmed up, there'll be a tremendous capacity for for the grants to get the materials and so forth and so on. But it would be, in terms of, Annapolis doesn't have a lot of forest to be cleared anymore. But occasionally it comes up that builders need to replant trees, and the fee in lieu has never been workable. But the problem is that they don't have any place to plant them. And the obvious places to plant them are on these school fields, which get as hot as downtown Baltimore in the middle of the summer. So anyway, just to let you know, I may come around to be asking for the support of everybody in the city to get the school system to agree on a policy that says basically yes instead of basically no. Okay?
Sounds fantastic.
All right. I have a pen in my pocket ready for you to sign the letter.
It is a recommendation in the comprehensive plan update, so.
It is.
Yeah.
I saw that, and it's right. And anyway, we're gonna. That's that.
So I'm going to add something to that. I think that's fantastic. I love trees. For a lot of people who don't know about this about trees, the male tree creates pollen.
The what does?
Male trees. Trees have male and female, right? Female trees create the fruit. One of the reasons why we have a pollen problem is because most of the trees that are planted in the last 100 years are male trees. You can look this up. It's crazy, right? So if we're going to plant trees on school properties and stuff, I simply ask that we consider planting female trees. They absorb some of that pollen, so there's less pollen in the air, and then you also get fruit.
I think you're making Eric's plan 475 pages now, so let's be careful.
But not all.
All right, I got to get this
My
kid in the
car
back
is-
to bed.
Those
My
details
car
can
is
get worked
covered
out.
in green right now, covered in green, because all we plant are male trees.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Really
Great
good
job.
to talk
I really
in person.
appreciate everything.
Impressive. Thank you.
Formally, what we need to do is decide on a recommendation and any sort of observations or that we want to add to that recommendation. That's what our business is next, okay? So we might start off with a motion to approve or recommend approval of the capital improvement budget and the rates and fees that are associated with it. Any observations that might be made? So let's begin that discussion. I will make the motion to approve it. If there's anything that we think needs to be added as observations or recommendations, now's the time to discuss them. So I move that we approve the capital improvement budget as proposed.
I second.
Okay. So any discussion before we proceed on to a vote? Any thoughts? Just thoughts.
Yeah, I'll give a thought. When it comes to, Mr. Leszewski mentioned here when it came to the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative, and when it comes to getting more housing, right? Big proponent for mixed use and mixed income housing. I don't think consolidating poverty is a good thing, but if we look at the past of Annapolis, that's a lot of what we've done. So I love the direction that it sounds like we're going. And so just double down on that is to ensure that we're building a city that welcomes all through various socioeconomic backgrounds. And we do that by ensuring that we have neighborhoods that welcome everybody, and it spreads that opportunity by having that mixed income and mixed use. And also by having mixed use, we cut down on that transportation because people can walk to businesses for most of their goods rather than always having to get into their car to drive miles for groceries or anything else their needs are.
What in the capital budget, though, is relates to mixed use. I don't recall seeing anything in there.
Well, specifically, it would be that the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative that they briefed.
There's a $2 million line item that is going to developers that could be matched by the state to make it 4 million, which would create plans that would comply with the comprehensive plan.
Correct.
But I don't.
Correct, it's just one, just
I
to
don't
be,
want to conflate.
1 million.
1 million.
1 million be
Sorry,
matched.
million,
2
sorry.
million. So, yeah,
Million goes to 2 million with the match, sorry.
I don't want to conflate mixed income with mixed use. That Eastport Terrace Harbor House is primarily mixed income, and there's very little commercial space, at least in the designs which have been offered to us at a work session, very little commercial activity, very little. So I don't want to conflate those two. So let me go back to my question.
Yep.
Where in the budget we've seen, is anything relating to mixed use?
So when we talk, what I'm saying here is that when we're talking about that Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative, and that $2 million to help fund, 1 million from us, 1 million from the state, that if there's a way that we can encourage the developers to develop in a manner that does, and I don't know the legality of this, maybe Mr. Lachowski can add to it, is that we don't just build, or that it's not just housing. I've seen
just
public
housing.
housing. Correct. What I'm saying here is I've seen public housing in areas outside of the state of Maryland, so I don't know what they can do here in the state of Maryland, where they build it where there's commercial facilities right there on the same site as the affordable housing.
Okay, so one of the, if I can just put it into words, what you're proposing is that the council, is that the design of city, whatever it's called, Choice Neighborhood Initiative, include some commercial activity.
More commercial activity and
because there was
space.
only one
Tiny
like convenience store
Yeah.
near the bus stop that was proposed.
Absolutely good point, and I'm glad you brought it up because we were shocked at how little commercial mixed-use
Yeah.
space there was, because the whole idea is to make sure there are eyes on the street, more people walking and getting to places without having to get in their car, and they've reduced the mixed use in the last design to something that just seems not workable at all.
Yep.
So,
Okay,
I guess-
that's a legitimate recommendation.
Is the priority, though, well, the priority is mixed housing and the capital budget. We're talking about the capital budget here, so it's not really intended to, I mean, it could as part of the design plans, but you're just looking for the funding to get the design itself. But you could include some mixed-use space within that design, but
Yeah.
you'd be borrowing from the need for mixed-use housing in order to put mixed use. And the comprehensive plan has more zoning opportunities to build more mixed use together with, you know, transit opportunities for people in the mixed housing to access the mixed use. I mean, I'm just trying to paint
so
this picture.
You're basically correct. I mean, the comprehensive plan update puts a lot of emphasis on creating mixed use along primarily on our major corridors, you know, for the reasons you suggested. The CNI project has an opportunity to really put that into action, and the plan that was approved by HUD does have some commercial space, but it could be more. Madison Street would be sort of the main corridor through, would be a much more active mixed-use corridor. But the challenge, so it's in my opinion, it's a perfectly legitimate recommendation to say, you know, a condition of this pre-development funding is to really emphasize that mixed-use component. Because I think from my experience with these affordable housing developers, they're really adept at putting the financing together for the housing component, but the financing for the commercial development is much more challenging, and that's not necessarily their strong suit, or they might not be as excited about that component because of the financing challenges. And so, you know, I think the plan that was approved definitely puts emphasis on having mixed use, but like, for example, an opportunity is that new HACA offices would be located along that kind of Main Street strip on Madison. But if we were to find another office location for HACA, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be on that site, we could really dramatically expand the commercial footprint in the property. So it's not necessarily, it would definitely not take away from the housing, but it'd be just more more proactive and thinking about the commercial opportunities, So,
That's a great point. So if we were to put some kind of a precondition on that, would we try to suggest a percentage of the development that could go to commercial, or what would be the most helpful?
I don't know if it'd be a percentage as much as it being just a, trying to think of the right words. I mean, it's just a component of the development that is, that serves the community. I mean, I think it's hard to really put a number on the exact what's the right footprint for that commercial component, but it should be really a present element of the plan. I mean, just really integrated with the community. So,
Not a second.
right, not a second.
That's the last design we saw and which was approved. It's just
Right.
thrown in there and it's not enough
Yeah, I mean, I
for
think
what you're trying to accomplish.
It has to be considered at the same time as the housing component.
Right. So what we're recommending is that there be an emphasis or a consideration and emphasis on potential for more commercial, for more mixed use, community serving mixed uses as part of the city's design contribution. Okay, something along those lines. Okay, all right. Now, monies to be spent to pursue things like the rezonings, form-based code, not imposition, but inauguration, introduction. Is all of that in the operating budgets?
Yeah, that's all in operating.
Yeah, there's not much in the capital budget that really relates directly to mixed use. Gotcha.
Right. You could argue that all this emphasis on retrofitting our roadways to be more walkable and bikeable is putting emphasis on the value of having retail, commercial businesses that aren't just oriented to cars, the drive-throughs or the, large seas of parking, that when you have foot traffic and bike traffic, certain kind of businesses thrive off of that type of activity. So, yeah. But
If you want to make that observation, that's the second kind of observation or recommendation that the commission considers the emphases on bike paths, sidewalks, and getting people to move. I forgot there's a word that you used for that kind of movement.
Multimodal?
No,
Active transportation.
that's it.
yeah,
That it will lead to successes of mixed use development at certain places. I mean, that's the kind of observation. Basically, though, we're just talking.
But it's recommending that those commercial businesses are catering to active transportation users more.
Yes, and that the emphasis in the capital budget on these active transportation projects is going to lead to more commercial activity,
Yep.
which is frankly, tax beneficial.
Hard to
That's
enforce.
that's a good one. Okay. What else? I cannot I'm struck by how different this budget is. This really emphasizes people's use of public property water accesses, parks, all kinds of things in little ways. Some of them bigger, but some of them very small. I mean, it's really a change. So anyway, if that's language that you think should be incorporated in our
I mean, I think we could
recommendations,
make a motion.
why we approve it? Why do we approve it?
We can make a motion to approve with those two recommendations, though,
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
would make.
specific ones, and then some general observations on our part. Write up the findings, and we'll. All right, but the main motion is to approve the capital budget as presented. Any further discussion at this point? All right. All those in favor of recommending that the city council adopt this capital improvement budget, say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Now, I do have a question as to timing on this. We do have a meeting on Tuesday night with the HPC on the Maritime Welcome Center. I don't know if we can I don't know that it's possible, probably not. Otherwise, we have to wait until the beginning of June to get these findings in.
I mean, is it possible to vote on, since they're relatively brief? I don't know. I feel like there have been instances where you sort of did live findings. Am I mistaken about that? Where you sort of, because of the time crunch, but actually, what we were able to do in those circumstances, you were able to kind of share, it was like during a virtual meeting and you could kind of share the findings. But I don't know.
I mean, these are only findings. I mean, the vote has been made. The hearing
the vote has been made,
The hearing has
so.
been held. The vote has been made,
Yeah.
and it's simply findings which either accurately reflect our sentiments. And so I'm wondering if we can't use that opportunity. We're all going to be in this room on Tuesday night.
It's a question, I mean, maybe for the law office or Lisa, I don't know if you have an opinion. I mean, it's a work session, which typically don't have votes. But could they have could they have a
There's gotta be
special
some way for
session
us-
for the planning
Yeah, there's
commission to
gotta be a
vote on
way-
their findings prior to that work session?
Because they're just findings, and none of this is like a
not
final
like a-
justiciable event. It's simply recommendations to the city council on a budget. Do what?
I don't think we have enough time to have another,
I can't hear you.
I don't think there's enough time to have another hearing.
No, we're not going to have a hearing. A hearing is not required, I don't think,
No, it wouldn't be a hearing. It would just be to vote on the findings.
like an administrative decision.
It doesn't require any advertisement or anything like that.
Okay.
But
We'll see can happen. We'll see what can happen Tuesday night. You will not be there?
Yeah. I have a drought and wildfire summit in New Mexico next week.
Who?
Drought and wildfire summit
As
for,
one does.
well, it's for FEMA, it's for work. I'm presenting on drought and
It's
wildfire
amazing. It's cool.
next week, so I won't be here. Sorry. Unless it's virtual, then I can log in virtually, but
No, it's going to be a work session with HPC. But I do think that Mr. Pline and Svakianudis, I think, will be here. But Pline, I think, will be here, so we'll have a presence. It will be televised and recorded, and you may want to really look at it later because it's a work session and on the Maritime Welcome Center, and it will ultimately come back to us. So it'd probably be worth your time at some point to look at it.
I'll certainly watch it.
And I don't think it'll be long.
Yep.
Okay. So I will see you guys here Tuesday night at 7 p.m.
And so I understand that we're going to try to have a vote on the findings at that
Yes.
meeting as
Yes.
just a procedural matter. Okay,
Yes,
got it.
we may convene just for that purpose and then adjourn.
Are there any things left on the agenda that we didn't do, like approval of the minutes from April 4th?
Oh. That is true. Glad you reminded me.
I made some changes. Did they my changes get circulated? No, I just
I
changed
did.
it
They
and sent
did.
it to, yeah, I saw it. Sent it to everyone, so.
Yep. I have them.
I'm sorry, you sent it to me by email? I missed that.
Or whoever was, yeah, I think it was.
It was one paragraph, correct?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, why don't I read it? I'll read it out loud, or you can read it out loud. It's
I put the remains the need for under stage 2 businesses, and then business and recruitment, I put remained as outlined in the July 2021 Maritime Workforce Report. And the other section was the economic development staff recommends Alderman Savage and Alderman Arnett revisit key provisions of O2521. That's something that staff and planning commission both agreed upon. It has to do with non-compliance with reporting requirements and non-compliance with the actual use percentages. Basically saying everyone agreed that we need to go back and revisit this and have the alderman look at it. Which was good, because staff and planning commission agreed that was sort of the problem.
Yes.
That's all my changes.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? I think it does reflect what we talked about.
There's a lot more, but I think it would have been really long minutes if we tried to have, like, recap our discussion.
Right.
And you will have most of that.
Okay. All those in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
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 Okay, and no, any opposed? No. Anything else we need to do on this? I need to inform you about what's coming up. In June, early June, the first meeting in June, we're going to be getting, what's it called? Parole Place. Parole Place? Parole Place. You know, it's a very large development. Were you present
talked
for the
about
work session when?
No.
You have not?
You
So you and
briefed me.
Quentin have not seen?
We've not.
Not seen this at all? Okay. Okay. It's big. I don't know of anything else on the agenda for that night. I'm hoping that there's not anything that's going to be important. I want to give this project a lot of time. And yet, I don't want to feel hurried. If it needs to go to a second session, I'd like to know if anybody has any problems later in June with a calendar.
Yeah, I'm going to be
You're
really out of town. Like,
really out of town.
really out of town. I can tell you when exact. There's like 2 days on that. And I can tell you when they are, but yeah.
Are
Okay.
you available for the 6th?
I think so. Yes, and matter of fact, I mean, putting on.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, we don't have any, the only thing, Ms. Consola and I were talking earlier today about the agenda, and we anticipate there'll be a public hearing for a piece of legislation, but it does not necessarily need to be on the discussion agenda for the commission.
What's the legislation?
What's the number? It's the drive-through legislation.
Okay.
So, but we
Okay.
just wanted to
Okay.
do the
So
public hearing.
let's deal with, first of all, who's going to be here. June the 6th? Is that when it
I'm-
is?
I'm
Yeah.
out of the country.
You're out of the country?
I am.
So
I'll be here.
June 6th, I will be here, but later in June, the 22nd through the 28th, I will be away if we have to schedule another one later.
okay,
Yes,
so the
for
20th.
6th, Diane, for the 6th. You for the 6th, you need one more at least.
So we have yes
Actually, Diane.
For the
for June 6th.
6th, yes,
For
I'll
the
be
rest
here.
of June, no.
I'm out for the 6th, but they're in.
And you're the opposite. Okay.
I cannot do the 6th.
And what about later in the month?
Yeah, I'm back later in the month. I'm away for the first week.
Okay, Butler,
Good
What-
for June 6th and bad for the rest of the month.
you're in for June 6th and out for the rest of the month?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know about Pline. Okay. Okay. I'll try to keep track of this, so, because it's been a long time coming, this development, it's big. They've waited to get all of their APF and all kinds of details done, and July, the first meeting in July, like is in actually the second week. So anyway, if we can get things done, we should get things done. We'll
So
deal
we
with it.
should put July 11th on the calendar right now, because July 4th is a Thursday, we're not meeting on July 4th. So July 11th would be our rescheduled planning commission meeting
Yes.
for July? Okay.
Let me continue then. Who's looking good or bad for July 11th?
I could be here July 11th, I know that. What,
You're,
actually, wait a minute, I take that back.
Just for June, I'm only away the 4th to the 8th, then I'm good any other day in June.
so you're, yes.
So we
for-
could do the 3rd, I don't know if that's, I don't know
Okay.
how your days of the week work, but.
You're available third week.
No, the 3rd of June, I'm good, but then I'm out 4th to the 8th, but any other date outside of the 4th to the 8th.
Okay, what about Cummings? July 11th.
I don't know yet.
You don't know yet?
That's,
Okay.
I may be here that night and then fly the next morning, or I may fly that night out to a conference. Would you like me to start? I could always start like a Google Calendar where we can all put our essentially blocked out dates. You want me to do that sometime? That way we can all just upload what dates are not good for us, and it makes it really easy to coordinate.
Yeah, that helps.
Work it out with
Yeah, I'll get that for you.
Scatoli, okay? And let her generate it actually and be in charge of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll help.
Well, give us all,
Right.
I can make her the manager of it, and then all of us with editable rights.
Do I get a tutorial on how to use it?
I will give you a tutorial.
Somebody else will do it for you. And you're always here, so.
All right, so July 11th is something, this is, see, we got quorum problems.
That's the Esri conference, so it's all.
Okay. If nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.